To the meeting of the Community Development
Really
Committee,
don't have any bus advantage.
the Metropolitan Council for July 16th, 2018. Entertain a motion to approve our agenda this afternoon.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Our agenda is adopted. Next is the approval of our June 18th minutes. Is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Are there changes or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Our minutes are also adopted. We have a very substantial business agenda, lots of important work, so let's dive in. Our first item is 2018-170 Central Anoka Regional Trail Master Plan Amendment. Tracy Kinney is here. Good afternoon.
Chair
Welcome.
Comers, committee members, thanks for having me here today. My name is Tracy Kinney. I'm a planner in Regional Parks and Natural Resources. What you have before you today is Central Anoka County Regional Trail Master Plan Amendment. The Central Anoka County Regional Trail is located in Central Anoka County. It travels 26 miles. 18.5 miles are built, 10 miles are planned. The Metropolitan Council approved the current master plan for the regional trail in May of 1999. The master plan amendment is located in the western part of the county in the city of Ramsey. Anoka County is proposing to change the trail amendment shown in blue to the trail amendment to the trail alignment shown in blue to the trail alignment shown in red to better connect the city of Ramsey's downtown core and provide a safe crossing over US Highway 10 to the Mississippi West Regional Park. Once proposed, the changes will and the changes are completed, the regional trail designation for the blue trail will then be transferred to the red trail. This amendment for the trail development is for trail development only, and there is no acquisition needed. The proposed trail is mostly a 10-foot wide bituminous path that is separate from the sidewalk and protected from the road. The proposed change anticipates a signalized intersection at Bunker Lake Boulevard and Center Street with a pedestrian crosswalk signal to be used in the interim. US Highway 10 was identified as a barrier to bicycling and pedestrians in the region in the 2018 Regional Bicycle Barrier Study. Anoka County is proposing a pedestrian bridge to extend from the existing North Star Station pedestrian bridge for safe access to the park. The table shows the breakdown of the pedestrian bridge and the design, engineering, construction costs of the trail. The total cost is just under $9 million. The proposed master plan is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, and it's also consistent with Planning Strategy 1 planning and Planning Strategy 3 Joint Powers Agreements and other council policies. The actions you have before you today are to approve the Central Anoka County Regional Trail Master Plan Amendment and also to require Anoka County, prior to initiating development of the regional trail, to provide a joint powers agreement with the City of Ramsey that outlines and confirms the use of the city-owned right-of-way and easements for regional trail use.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
for the report. Yes,
Mr.
Councilmember
Chair,
Grossman.
thank you. I don't know this area really well, so I apologize for this question. So the 18.5-mile existing trail that will no longer be part of the regional trail system, will it still be maintained as a trail corridor through the city?
Mr. Chair, committee members, the overall regional trail which you see right here, which spans from the east to the west in the county, is 26 miles, and 18 and a half miles of it exists. 10 miles are planned, and then you see a really small part of it, which is just a circle all the way to the west of the full regional trail. Uh, the blue is the connection to the park. That is the existing trail.
Yeah.
It is going to remain.
That was my question.
Thank you. Yeah, it is going to remain, but the regional trail designation is going to be removed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you want to see a better look at what this is going to look like, go to the actual agenda item and scroll down, and there's a picture of what the proposed pedestrian bridge is going to look like. It's a really unique project. It's not like anything we have currently in the system, because it's going to come off of the existing station for the North Star train. Has a overpass for pedestrians to get from one side of the train tracks to the other. It's going to continue that all the way over to the park, so that pedestrians and bicyclists are actually going to be using the elevator like a train rider to go up and then go across and take the loop on the other side. As you can see from the picture, it's a very extensive amount of right-of-way that you've got to cross with many, many, many lanes. And the Parks and Open Space Commission had a long discussion about the weirdness of having an elevator in the middle of a regional trail and all of that kind of stuff, but everybody was able to work through it and passed unanimously amongst the committee. But the idea is, if somebody is creeped out by doing the overpass and the elevator, they also have the option of doing the existing crossing, which is a little scary because it's got a lot of lanes to cover.
Right. Other questions? We'll entertain a motion if members find it
I would move
appropriate.
approval.
It's been moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Is there discussion to the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, our next item is 2018-171, Annual Metropolitan Regional Parks Operation and Maintenance. Deb Jensen is here to present. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. And on a good day, I could advance the slides. On a bad day, maybe not so much. Well, maybe we'll do this without it.
Maybe they're working to put it up in the back.
Allow me to tell you then, please, committee members. Minnesota Statute 473.351 provides that the state will cover a portion of the operation and maintenance costs for the regional park system. Aha, there we go. Thank you, Greg. They do this because so many of our visitors every year come from outside the individual taxing districts for each of our regional parks implementing agencies. The law says that they will provide 40% of all of the O&M. They do this in 473.351 by allocating the formula by which we make all of these allocations. We calculate the proportional acreage, the proportional visits, and the eligible expenditures for each of the agencies in order to determine what each of them will get from the state appropriation. Agencies submit their claim costs in May. We reviewed those this year, and there were more than 100,000 lines of data because we have to look through their expenditures to determine if they're eligible and exclude those that are not. We then apply that statutory formula to the overall amount, and we pay the agencies only when we get the funds from the state. The state gives us the general fund portion of the allocation, which this year is $2.54 million in a lump sum right around August 1st, and we turn it around within a few days and pay it out to the agencies. The remaining piece comes from lottery and lieu funds, and we get those 1/12 of the estimate every month. We turn those back around as soon as we get them. Here's a chart that shows the state's commitment versus actual costs versus what the state has actually paid. The top red line is the increase in operation and maintenance costs from 1985 to 2017. The middle line is the state's commitment, and the bottom line is what's actually been appropriated. The proposed action is a little bit different this year from what you've heard in the past. The statute actually requires that the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission reports to the council the eligible expenditures. It doesn't say so, but they do that so that we can figure out how much we pay the agencies. So this year, the proposed action is that the council accept the Regional Park System State Fiscal Year 2019 Operation and Maintenance Report, and you can see the individual amounts below. With that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just curious about examples of what would be an eligible versus non-eligible cost. Just curious.
Well, for example, we found 4 trucks being charged to us this year, but those are capitalized expenses, so they're not eligible as an operation and maintenance expense. We also exclude things like lobbying costs and some food and refreshment costs. The costs that we will accept were determined through a series of 13 meetings in 2016, 10 with individual agencies, 3 that we held here at the council, and the council's controller was involved in all of the decision making.
Thank you.
Deb, I have a question. The difference that you've documented here between the appropriation and the statutory payout, would it be fair to presume that that gap is typically covered with property tax levy by the agencies, or do we have any sense about how that amount is covered?
Mr. Chair, I believe that would be correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Wolf?
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chair. The amount that the counties or cities in various cases are paying is that big gap between the red and the green instead of the smaller gap between the red and the blue. It's unfortunate because for the metro area, the regional parks are considered an equivalent of the state park system. And I don't think that the legislature would ever consider only funding 1/6 of what they're supposed to be paying towards the state park system, but that's basically what they're doing on this. It's not really a partnership anymore.
Mr. Chair, if I can add to that, the highest percentage that the state has ever provided was 19%. This past year, it was just below 8%.
Just like transportation funding.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification about that. Are there other questions or comments? I would entertain a motion.
I would move approval, Mr. Chair.
There's been a motion.
Second.
Been seconded. Discussion of the motion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, committee members.
Thank you. Members, our third item is 2018-172, a significant release of draft 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan for public comment and our setting of the public hearing date. Ms. Mullen, Dan Markell, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for having us today and for listening to this draft Regional Parks Policy Plan update. Today is largely a procedural step. We are asking for your support to recommend the release of the draft Regional Parks Policy Plan update and set the date for the public hearing. Dan and I will be back on Wednesday to the full committee of the whole for a more expansive discussion where we'll walk through the changes being proposed in the draft plan. And we'll also then talk more in detail about next steps. Sorry, I missed that. Yeah.
Very good. So as you recall, we've been at this for some time. We're now in at least the second half of this slide. about ready in that July 2018 release draft for public comment, leading through the summer and into the fall, where we'll have a public hearing, the process closes, and we respond to public comments. This month is largely stepping forward through the process. Today we're here. We were at MPOSC last week. Equity Advisory Committee will be meeting with them tomorrow. Emmett mentioned already on Wednesday, we'll be at the Committee of the Whole to have an in-depth discussion about the plan and the plan changes, leading to July 25th Met Council, where the public hearing will be set, the open period for comments, and sort of set the whole thing officially in motion. Then back at it in September again, CDC, public hearing comment closes, and unless the world ends, we will present this to the council in November for plan approval. And so today we're just asking for kind of procedural authorization to move forward. We do want to give you a little heads up, though, that on Wednesday we'll be having this larger discussion and find out if there are particular things that you want to make sure we cover on Wednesday. So how can we help you on Wednesday? And then thinking ahead to Wednesday, how can we help you through the summer as this thing's on the street for discussion? Can we set up meetings for you? Can we go to your meetings? Can we make up meetings to go to? Can we host a new meeting? How can we help you? So the question of this slide is really, is there anything you want us to cover on Wednesday for sure?
Yes,
Yeah,
Councilmember
here's a
Dorfman.
question about that. Since you're going to the Equity Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow, is that just a presentation of what's in the plan for them? Or do you foresee a robust discussion with them and getting their input tomorrow? Or does that come later?
Mr. Chair, committee members, we have a sort of two-part strategy with the Equity Advisory Committee. Tomorrow we'll be going and doing a brief overview of what the plan is. And just a little detail, we're actually coming back in August for a more detailed discussion, similar to for you guys today and on Wednesday.
That's great. And I would just ask, I mean, I hope you'll share with us the discussion and the input you received now in August from the Equity Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to beat this dead horse on the floor into a pulp, as far as for Wednesday, I think it would be helpful to our compatriots as a committee of the whole to devote a couple of minutes slowly walking through, in addition to what you're going to do with the Equity Advisory Committee, all the activity that you've endured so far in the journey with exploring the equity outcome for Thrive in the intersection with this work and what will be pursued further. Okay?
Definitely.
Thank you.
So unless there are
continue.
more questions, our recommendation for today is to release the draft 2040 policy plan update for public comment, authorize a public hearing that will be at this committee at 4 o'clock on Monday, the 17th of September, that we receive public comment from July 26th through September 24th, and to direct staff to publish the public hearing notice to the plan. That's the recommendation, and I just wanted to make an aside that if anyone wants a paper copy of the plan, I did bring a few for committee members and anyone in the audience that is interested for this hot selling item.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think just from my point of view, I want to take a moment just to recognize over the last year all the staff time and effort, creativity that's gone into this really critical update. So thank you for all of you who've been involved in that work. Also want to really recognize the substantial public engagement that also went on, I think particularly kind of over the last school year, if you will. I think that's critical, and we have a unique opportunity with the plans where we have more regular updates, I think, to constantly be freshening that public engagement and input. So this is a great, I think, example of that. Thank you. One last thing I want to just mention too is, I think for Wednesday's conversation, having what's presented as attachment A in the business item in hard copy, I think could be useful. That might be too lengthy for some, but I think it's a really nice kind of digest of the key elements of the update. So
We will bring that, Mr. Chair, summary of the
great.
changes.
Councilmember Elkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions. So, did you guys tweak anything related to cell phone towers or bike paths?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Elkins, we did not change anything with regard to the cell phone towers because we thought it provided exceptions. However, I know that isn't perhaps satisfactory to you. So
No, I just so what this is about is that we're heading into the era of 5G, where cell phone towers will be smaller but much more frequently spaced, and where the state legislature has already passed a law basically saying that cell phone companies can put these new 5G towers anywhere they want in the public right of way. And I think that's only a matter of time before that there needs to be a policy related to where they can go within parks as well. And I think we need to address it.
Thank you.
And
Councilmember Elkins.
the second one was the bike paths. Is that, we've had testimony a couple of times before us from folks who are concerned about the design guidelines for bikeways within regional parks, and I had suggested some verbiage that basically just directed people to the appropriate DNR or MnDOT documents about about what are appropriate as a reference, rather than going into gory detail within this. But I thought it was worth a mention since it keeps coming back to us.
Great, thank you.
So I'll probably mention it on Wednesday again, and I'll take one of those paper copies.
thank you, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Elkins. And I think we did get that last piece into this document. So, Chapter 7, policy number 1, strategy number 4.
Sounds about like the right place.
Okay, good.
I neglected also to extend my gratitude to the MPOSC and Council Member Wolf, you in particular. So thanks for your leadership and the leadership of that group. I know it's been key for developing this update. If there aren't other comments or questions, I entertain a motion. Members?
Move approval?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion to that motion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you on Wednesday. Next order of business is item 2018-188, City of Rogers High Density Residential Text Change Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Rhea and Raya. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. I'm here on behalf of Freya Thaman, presenting the Rogers Amendment since she could not be present today. So the amendment before you is the high-density residential text change for the City of Rogers. I would also like to say that Jason Seymour and Amy Pinode, City Planner and Planner from the City of Rogers, are in the audience if any questions come up that they can address. What am I doing? Oh, okay. So the City of Rogers is located on the northwestern side of Hennepin County. It is bordered by the cities of Dayton, Corcoran, Hanover, and also St. Michael and Otsego in Wright County. That's shown in this figure, which is also figure 1 of the staff report. Thrive MSP 2040 designates the city as both diversified rural and emerging suburban edge. The figure 2 of your staff report is this map that shows the regional systems in the city of Rogers. The CPA proposes to change the maximum allowable density for the high density residential land use guiding from 10 to 20 units per net developable acres to 10 to 40 units per net developable acres. Um, this is to respond to market conditions, including potential affordable housing. Um, and there are 7 areas within the city of Rogers that are currently guided as high density residential, as shown on this map, and they total about just over 64 acres. So the amendment details, as I mentioned, it's a text change for the high density residential land use category. The maximum allowed for this category is proposed to change from 10 to 20 units per net acres to 10 to 40 units per net acres. The 7 areas are just over 64 acres, and also the amendment does not change anything about the acreage of these 7 areas that you saw as just the maximum allowable density. All of these areas are located within the emerging suburban edge community designation, and the changes to better respond to development requests that are being made in the city. So staff find that the proposed amendment conforms to regional system plans, is consistent with the council policies, and is compatible with plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. So we bring the proposed action before you to adopt the attached review record and allow the city of Rogers to place the high density residential text change comprehensive plan amendment into effect, and find that the proposed amendment does not change the city's forecast, as well as advising the cities to implement the advisory comments in the review record for wastewater and housing. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you. Are there questions?
Mr. Chair, I'm
Member
just
Dorfman.
wondering, and Rhea, since city staff are here, if they wouldn't mind, and I know there's no projects in front of us right now, but talking about sort of what they foresee um, with this opportunity for higher density developments, and what the appetite is for building some affordable units in over time.
I'm going to ask Mr. Seymour to answer that question. Do you mind?
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jason Zimmer. I'm the city planner for the city of Rogers. I think to answer questions a couple ways. One of the things, this is sort of a precursor to what we're looking at from the 2040 comprehensive plan amendment. We've actually had a significant amount of interest from apartment developers, those of both market rate and affordable component, and a lot of those projects have come in over the 20 units per acre. We're actually working with sand companies right now on a project that they're looking at within the community, and so we're trying to keep moving that pendulum moving forward with this. And so this was a needed amendment that the city felt, rather than requiring them to make, that the city actually felt it was important that we made, so we can try and encourage more of the just multi-family high density residential development that the city really needs in the community. We know that just based on feedback from a lot of the businesses that we have, a disparity between the wages in the community in terms of the working jobs in the community and the housing that's currently available. So the city and the city council are taking a really hard look at affordable housing and trying to make that a high priority for the community. In the 2040 comprehensive plan, as I mentioned, we see this as there's a definite interest. There's also a market that's sort of driving the need for this sort of change that's out there. A lot of the areas that we're looking at within our 2040 comprehensive plan amendment are the areas that are adjacent to Highway 101 and I-94, which is the areas where the apartment developers want to be located. So all those areas are infill and redevelopment areas, and so again, the need to get the density up so they can come in with a project that satisfies what the city's hoping to accomplish, what the Metropolitan Council is also hoping to accomplish from that standpoint. So we think it's a good thing for the city as well as the region to be able to sort of fulfill everybody's targeted objectives, and really, from our standpoint, really provide a housing option that we're not currently providing. As you see, 64 acres in a city that's growing, that's not a lot. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council members, do you have questions?
I'll move approval. Seem to be on the roll. I think I've moved all of them so far.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there a discussion to the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is 2018-189, City of Corcoran, Pulte Encore Comprehensive Plan Amendment.
Hi again.
Welcome back, Ryan.
I just didn't leave. So I have another amendment for you from the City of Corcoran. This one, as shown in Figure 1 of your staff report, Thrive MSP gives the City of Corcoran a community designation of also diversified rural and emerging suburban edge, and the amendment is located within the emerging suburban edge part of the city. And the City of Corcoran is bordered by the cities of Rogers, Maple Grove, Medina, Greenfield, and Hanover, and the amendment it borders the city of Maple Grove. As shown in the figure 2 of your staff report, this map kind of shows the regional systems and the amendment area. So there isn't any trails or parks within the half a mile of this amendment. The existing planned land use for this area, based on the figure 3 of the report, is currently mixed residential, commercial, and high density residential. The amendment proposes to change this area to a proposed planned land use of all low density residential. The low density residential category is 3 to 5 units per acre for the city of Corcoran. There's a concept plan associated with this amendment that is currently 393 single-family lots, but again, this is just a concept plan. It hasn't been approved. And that's what's included as figure 4 of the staff report. There was also, as mentioned in the staff report, an EAW associated with this comprehensive plan amendment that staff reviewed a few months ago, and the comments were addressed as part of that review. So the findings for this amendment is that the proposed amendment conforms to the regional system plans, is consistent with council policies, and is compatible with plans of adjacent and affected jurisdiction. And with that, our proposed action before you is to adopt the attached review record and allow the City of Corcoran to put the Pulte Encore amendment into effect. Find that the amendment does not change the city's forecast, and that advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for housing and land use. Sorry, I missed that in the slide. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Are there questions?
Move approval.
And a motion?
Second.
Second.
Let me keep this thing going.
Discussion to the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is 2018-190. That's the City of Oakdale's 3M Small Area Plan Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Corinne Wendell is here. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Corinne Wendell, in Local Planning Assistance, Sector Rep for Districts 11 and 12. And I will be presenting on the 3M Small Area Plan Comprehensive Plan Amendment. So for this amendment, it's located in Oakdale, just east of Interstate 694 and then adjacent to 40th Street in Thrive MSP 2040. It's the community designation of suburban. And so that is the area in red that you see in figure 1 on the map. And then in figure 2 of your staff report, the map also shows the regional systems in relationship to the 3M small area plan. And so there are no significant regional systems affected the boundaries of this small area plan. So here's some of the amendment details. I'm just gonna kind of go through them. I'll put them all up on there for the audience to see. And so within this amendment, there's a few things that they would like to amend within the comprehensive plan. First is to incorporate that 3M small area plan into the comprehensive plan. They would like to have a new land use guiding land use designation of mixed use residential. They would also like to re-guide a portion of land from business campus to open space. And so it's a total of 210 acres, and so that's broken up into about 206.5 for the mixed-use residential, and then the remaining 4 acres from that business campus to the open space. And so it'll also add a narrative of that 3M small area plan into the comprehensive plan. And then in further detail, the mixed-use residential will be broken up into 3 different areas. So we have low, medium, and high density residential, and they have different dwelling units per acreage. So they have different densities attached to each one. And then in addition, because of the significant change in the land use, they're also asking for a forecast increase to support that change. And so here you can see the existing plan land use. So mostly in that dark red. So that is that business campus land use designation. And then for the proposed plan land use in that fuchsia or purple color is the new mixed use residential. And then sort of that, I don't know if you can see, it's a lighter green color. That's that remaining 4 acres that will be open space from business campus. And so also City of Oakdale has provided a scenario concept plan for you to see how the different neighborhoods would interchange with one another, how there will be different infrastructure associated with that, roadways, and then also some parks and open space, also new layout for housing and separate neighborhoods. And so we do find that it does conform to regional system plans, is consistent with the council policies, and compatible with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. We would ask that to adopt the attached review record, allowing the City of Oakdale to place the 3M small area plan, comprehensive plan amendment into effect, to revise the city's forecasts of population and households and employment that's shown in Table 1 of the review record. And then third, to advise the city to implement the advisory comments that are found for forecast and housing. And so, excuse me. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions?
Move approval.
Second.
There's been a motion.
Mm-hmm.
Discussion to the motion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next item, members, is 2018-192, Livable Communities Demonstration Account, TOD Pre-Development, and TBRA TOD Site Investigation Grant Recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll see if we can keep this string of motions rolling here. You may remember that in the spring and the fall, we have rounds of pre-development, and for the transit-oriented development category, also TBRA cleanup site investigation grants. And this round, we had 3 applications. These are what we're trying to accomplish. And this year, the council approved up to $250,000 for the pre-development under the demonstration account, demonstration transit-oriented development account, and up to $250,000 for the tax-based revitalization site investigation grants. We got 1 application for the development grant, pre-development studies, and 2 site investigation applications. This is the first one. This is the Livable Communities Demonstration Account redevelopment request. This is for a relocation study for the downtown YMCA in St. Paul. And this site would be located at the former Eco Lab building, kitty corner, northwest of the Central Station, downtown station in St. Paul. And the funding would go towards site plan analysis, financial modeling and pro forma, and stormwater management plans. This is the first of the TBRA site investigation grants. This might look familiar to you if you remember in this past year's uh, uh, Livable Communities Demonstration TOD account awards. We awarded a grant to this project. Now that they will have gained site control, they're looking for phase two and environmental site assessment, hazardous materials assessment, response action plan, and abatement plan for this site. Then this is another site just north of the Capitol. It's an existing office building and parking ramp. And they're looking at tearing down the office building and putting up an apartment building and restoring the parking ramp. So they'd be looking at a phase one and phase two environmental assessment, hazardous materials assessment, and abatement plan, and a response action plan. So with that, we would recommend that the council award one livable communities demonstration account transit-oriented development pre-development grant for $25,500 and two tax-based revitalization account transit-oriented development site investigation grants totaling $55,849. Authorize its community development division director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move this item. I see they're all St. Paul items, so I thought I'd do that favor for you.
Thank you.
And I'll
Councilman
second
Cunningham.
that.
Thank you for the second. I'd actually like to just speak briefly to the YMCA reimagination project in particular, because I think it has numerous points of intersection with our work, just in the sense that that building face is a challenge for us, Kitty Corner, with managing the Central Station block, and I think creating a place that feels safe and vibrant for everybody who's engaging that space. And I think the Y is just an excellent partner in thinking through how to do that most effectively. And then also there's work across, I guess that would be 5th Street, where we have a very busy bus stop also for our riders, and there's work afoot, including through our Livable Communities program, to really enhance the redevelopment of the Pioneer Press building and how that creates, I think, what we've done much more just conducive experience for our riders who use our system right there. So really excited about all the projects, but I wanted to call out that one in particular. Unless there are other comments, move ahead and vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Next is LCDA pre-development grant recommendations.
Well, mercifully, the titles are a little bit shorter on this one. You might recall that this is a reestablished category. We had gone several years without having pre-development grants for the regular, what we call the regular Livable Communities Demonstration account. But as a result of some of the discussions at the work group with the Metro Cities group and discussions among this committee, we decided to offer this category of funding again. We used to offer it years ago. It was discontinued in favor of more money going into actual projects. But this year, it was reestablished. We did receive one application. Oops. There was up to $250,000 made available for the spring round. We got one application for another project from St. Paul on the east side of St. Paul and I apologize for this image. It's pretty hard to see, but it's really early in the process, and part of the purpose of the pre-development grant is to assess the development potential and how to set things up. This is a vacant site. It's been used for some unofficial dumping and also some concrete washing of concrete trucks. So you might recall that this spring we also awarded a TBRA grant to do investigation on this site as well. What's being proposed here is rather interesting. There's two actual developers. One is proposing a 60-unit affordable apartment building. Another is a very large project that would be technically market rate, 480 unit market rate building, but they're hoping to achieve lower than average rents and possibly even within the range of the 80% affordability level through modular construction. So the pre-development grant would be used to do some site evaluation, do coordination on how the two projects would work together, and they're requesting $100,000 to do so. So with that, the staff recommendation is to award the one pre-development grant of $100,000 to this East 7th Street housing project.
Thank you, Paul. Comments? Yes, Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question isn't on the project or the grant. It looks really, really good, actually. My question is, so there was only one application, and is that typical, or do we think that's because it was reestablished category and cities didn't know about it yet, or is it something we have to put more information about out next time or something like that?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Barber, that's hard to say. I think it might have had something to do with the fact that this is remember the action to approve the fund distribution plan was a little late this year, so it was relatively fresh to get out there and to get projects identified that might take advantage of this. So it's a little early to tell whether this is a lack of interest or just simply because it was a relatively short window of time to apply.
All right, thanks.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm excited about this project. One of the things that's really been a need that hasn't been getting met is having a reasonably priced apartment building that you don't have to get on a waiting list to get into. So I think this is a great opportunity if it does go through, and I'm glad that we can help see that possibility forward. I would move approval.
Okay. Second.
Okay. Been moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is 2018-153, 2018 budget amendment for the second quarter. Good afternoon, Heather.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. We are proposing to close 3 parks projects totaling $4.7 million. These projects are complete. $267,000 in Parks and Trails funding will be reprogrammed to a prior authorized project within Anoka County's allocation, and $24,000 in regional bonds will be extinguished. We are also requesting to bring in new projects for park implementing agencies worth just under $21.7 million. 2 park acquisition opportunity fund projects includes $431,000 for the West Mississippi Regional Trail and $1.6 million for the Spring Lake Park Reserve. We're also bringing in $1.26 million to the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund account from the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund State Fiscal Year 19 appropriation. These funds will be allocated to a specific project at a future date. $9.2 million in legacy projects will be going to agencies for 15 projects, and those projects are based on the legacy allocation according to the formula established in law. And we'll be also bringing in $10.5 million for 5 direct appropriation projects that were included in the 2018 bonding bill. These are for projects such as development around Lake Waconia, a nature sanctuary visitor center on Bruce Vento Regional Trail, and an outdoor swimming pool in New Hope. This amendment supports stewardship through responsible planning and management of the regional park system, and supports livability and equity by acquiring 96.31 acres of property for the regional park system and improving amenities, transportation, and accessibility within the systems. I ask that you approve the capital adjustments as indicated in the attachments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments, council members? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I continue to be frustrated by those direct appropriations that the legislature keeps doing as part of the bonding bill instead of putting it into the larger pie for all of the agencies, but it is what it is, so I will move approval.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion to that motion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Last item on our business agenda is 2018-195 Regional Parks Capital Grant Agreement Authorization.
Good
Tori,
afternoon.
good afternoon.
Committee members, I'm Tori Dupre, I'm Senior Planner in Parks. Council authorization is required for the regional administrator to execute all agreements in excess of $500,000. The requested action will authorize the regional administrator or designee to execute Parks grant agreements on behalf of the Metropolitan Council. The Council's approval on the second quarter budget amendment, which is the business item that Heather just presented, authorizes new regional parks grants, of which 13 are over $500,000 and total about $18.8 million. Therefore, we're requesting authorization to prepare and execute the grant agreements included in your attachment 1. Regional parks projects advance thrive outcomes of livability by enhancing the quality of life in the region through increasing access to nature and outdoor recreation. Finally, the Council's action improves regional funding efficiency and increases our accountability to support the 10 regional park agency partners. With that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Move approval.
It's been moved.
Second.
It's been seconded. Discussion of the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, members, let's move into our information items, and then I'll come back with a suggestion about which of these items to place on consent. But to begin with, presentation about recent estimates for regional park system annual use. Entry Sock. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. I'm pleased to present to you this afternoon the Regional Park System Annual Use Estimate. The Annual Use Estimate provides us a glimpse into park use across the metropolitan region. Joel will be joining me later and will also share some of the exciting things that we've been doing related to parks-related research. Before I actually get into the number that you're here to listen to today, I want to provide a little bit of background to help contextualize the use estimate. The use estimate has been produced since 1995 on an annual basis, and the use estimate is used in formulas to determine each agency's share of the regional parks system grant program dollars. It also serves as an important indicator for park use trends over time. Therefore, the Regional Park System Use Estimate serves as a critically important foundation towards long-range planning and investment in the regional park system. The Regional Park System Estimate is a true representation of collaborative interagency work. It begins with counts the regional parks in regional parks and trails performed by the Regional Park Implementing Agency staff. Staff count pedestrians, bicyclists, vehicles, buses, and boats entering a regional park or trail. Counts are scheduled by council staff Memorial Day to Labor Day and randomized across days, times, and locations and entrances. In 2017, the council coordinated over 2,200 counts in regional parks and trails across the metro. The summer counts are then combined with the previous 3 years of count data. The use of 4 years of counts helps to normalize the data since weather, construction, and other anomalies can impact the use estimate. The data is then subjected to a host of additional calculations, including accounting for all possible days, times, and entrances in the regional park system. Lastly, special event data and camping data are added since those are not included in the counts. With regards to the 2017 annual use estimate, a total of 106 regional parks and trails were included in the counts. 3 new parks and trails were added to the counts in 2017. That includes Ramsey County's Lakes Links Regional Trail, Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Above the Falls Regional Park, and Dakota County's Minnesota Rivers Greenway Regional Trail. In addition to these system additions in 2017, other important changes took effect. that should be noted. As I noted previously, the use estimate includes additional calculations. These calculations include important inputs, such as the average persons per vehicle and visitation across the various seasons, fall, winter, and spring. This information is gathered directly from regional park and trail visitors through our visitor study. The visitor studies are not done on an annual basis, and the most recent visitor study input values are applied to the annual use estimate. The most recent visitor study was conducted in 2016, allowing us to update the use estimate inputs, the average persons per vehicle, and the seasonal visitation values. So now that we have that covered, we can actually get you to your number. In 2017, there was an estimated 58.3 million visits to the regional park system. In terms of the agency share of regional parks system visits, Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board had the highest share of estimated visits with over 20 million visits. Three Rivers Park District came in next with over 11.8 million visits, followed by St. Paul with 11.7 million visits. Collectively, these three agencies account for over 75% of the total annual estimated visits. Regional parks and trails in Scott County have the lowest share of estimated visits. In terms of individual regional parks and trails, the 5 regional parks with the highest estimated use total 20.1 million visits and account for over a third of all visits. Minneapolis Chain of Lakes and Como Regional Park, Zoo and Conservatory are the top 2 most visited parks. Rounding out the top 5, you have 3 parks along the Mississippi River corridor. An estimate for each park and trail can be found online, and the information on accessing materials will be provided in a few minutes. In terms of visitation over time, the following figure illustrates visits between 2004 and 2017 and shows a relatively steady growth over time. You see a bump in this year, accounting for a 22% jump as compared to the previous year. After careful investigation, I can report that the change is overwhelmingly attributed to the updated seasonal visitation inputs added to the use estimate calculation. If you recall, the regional park and trail visitors who took our survey in 2016 reported more visits in fall, winter, and spring than visitors did in 2008. Therefore, the rise in annual visits in 2017 is attributed to the increase in visitation in fall, winter, and spring. In fact, if we had used the old seasonal visit values, the estimated annual use for this year would have shown no net increase in estimated visits. Next, I'm going to ask my manager, Joel Hudding, to come up and share with you some exciting parks-related research.
Okay, Mr. Chair, committee members, Joel Hudding, new manager of research and community development, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of parks research. I really don't think that it's an overstatement to say that the Twin Cities Regional Park System is the best in the country. I think we can all probably agree with that. Anytime you see best parks, right, you're always seeing Minneapolis, St. Paul, you're seeing the Twin Cities region. And parks are about quality of life and health. They're about livability. Parks are, they're where we play. They're where we get a respite from daily life, right? And so, to kind of match that level of importance in our region, we're really expanding our parks research capacity. So one of the first things that we've done is Raintree has been brought onto the research team. So she's now actually part of the bigger community development research team. We're also really exploring some new innovative data sources. So one example of that, we're looking at GPS cell phone location data to try to understand travel behavior to all the regional parks. And along with that, we're also developing a lot of interactive apps and data analysis tools that really kind of bring the data to life. Really create some rich new insights. We're also preparing for the 2020 visitor study. And so with that, we're bringing a steering committee with the implementing agencies We're also going to bring a professor from Clemson University to teach a half-day workshop on parks research methods. And today, we are unveiling our new parks research brand, which is Play Features. So having a research brand is going to really serve to elevate the level of importance of parks research. So it lifts it up and it gives it creates a new accessible format where community members, council members, policymakers, or anyone can read this report and glean key insights about the park system. It's really also about modernizing the look and feel of our research to match the innovation that we want to put forward in this area. And so along with that, it's a lot more than just static reports. We put out PDF reports, people read them, they can be a little bit dry, but we really want to be putting out interactive data visualizations and planning apps. And just an example of what's to come, here is an app that one of our staff members has been working on. It's a little hard to see on your screens here, where we're actually able to use this app to visualize the GPS location data that I was talking about earlier. So all the user has to do is click on any individual park and they can see the travel shed and the relative density of where people are coming to that park and get key statistics on the fly, like the percentage of local versus non-local visits for each park, each agency, and the region. So it's promising to be a really exciting tool. We're also going to be continue to expand this using our visitor study data to create some more interactive features there. And Raintree and I, the rest of the staff, are just all really excited about the future and what's to come. So with that, we'll take questions.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, this was a great survey, and I really appreciate the new look, et cetera. So thank you for that great work. I'm just wondering, we've been doing a survey based to ensure that people of color are using the parks. Is that coming, or something I'm missing today, or are we not doing that anymore? Or, just curious.
Council member, that is certainly something that we're interested in studying, and there has been some past research done in that area, and it's something that I think is very important to consider particularly as we're developing the 2020 visitor study, and we're thinking about the questions we want to ask and the potential barriers to use that may come up based on different socioeconomic and demographic groups. And so between that and potentially other efforts, more qualitative research type efforts, I think it's going to be key to our strategy for parks research going forward.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, I'm just trying to, so we are doing that, and that will be a study that's coming up? I'm not clear. I just want to know, is that going to happen? Are we doing it? Because that was an answer didn't give me a kind of confidence I was looking for.
Certainly in the 2020 visitor study, that will be a key element.
And that'll come up at what point?
Well, planning for that is later this year. So we'll start planning in around mid-September. The actual implementation won't be until roughly Memorial Day of 2019 or 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to, is this part of a regular cycle will this will occur, or is this something that we're doing as a one-off, or is this going to be part of our regular research portfolio?
Mr. Chair, Council Member, could you just clarify specifically which part?
People of color, other marginalized groups that are using parks. I want to know.
Certainly at a very, yes, Mr. Chair, Council Member, certainly at a very bare minimum, we're doing the visitor study every 5 years going forward. And so at the bare minimum, we'll be including questions to understand potential barriers to usage by people of color, and of various other socioeconomic and demographic classes. So every 5 years at very bare minimum, but there will be qualitative research efforts conducted within them, just not specifically planned at this point.
I can take that question offline.
Well, Councilmember Cunningham, I'm also interested in the question that you raised, and I wonder. I found the last, I think it was the last iteration of an in-depth effort along that front, which we undertook in 2014 or so, I believe. That was really useful. It disrupted a lot of the expectations I had about the conclusions that the study would reach. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I hear you asking is, are we committing to a regular repeating of that same kind of exercise on something more frequent than the 5-year visitorship study? Is that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
that is the question.
Right.
And I'd like to add, if not, I'd like to request that be done. And, whatever we need to do that, we take a vote, whatever. I think it's important.
Councilmember Wolf, do you have a comment on this?
Yes, Mr.
Topic?
Chair. It was
Okay.
my understanding that this most recent visitor survey included demographic information and that it was more balanced than the 2008 one was. Is that not the case?
Council member, well, actually, there was, the 2016 visitor study did not show as great a disparity as it did in 2008, according to race and ethnicity. That is correct. But that said, it's only talking to people inside the regional park system and not talking to people who haven't overcome those barriers that I think Councilmember Cunningham is getting at. So
I think we're sort of talking about two related but distinct efforts where we've got a qualitative evaluation of barriers to experiencing the regional park system, and then we've got a quantitative count process that we do for a whole bunch of reasons also. I think coming back to the qualitative piece about what are the barriers to usage, feels to me like something that we should be talking about in our work plan dialogue for the coming process. Just given the fact that was, I think, a vehicle for really rich insights in the last time, I would like to at least have dialogue about the value of repeating that on a cycle at least. So, Councilmember Cunningham, does that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that. And
Okay.
That's really what I was looking for.
Okay. Thank you for raising it.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Lisa,
we
please.
really appreciate that feedback too. And as we go into this fall and develop future work plans for next year and following years, staff will discuss when the right times are for qualitative efforts, costs, and make that part of our work plan and budgets in future years.
Great. I think it's very exciting to think about all of the potential insight really across the whole park's function that becomes possible as technology improves and our capacity improves, et cetera. So I'm also very excited. Other comments or questions? Councilmember Munn.
Mr. Chair, I just want to echo your suggestion and Gary's suggestion. When we talked about Raintree's work, we are really interested in knowing what the input is from people who aren't using the parks, who live near them, who could be using them, but aren't. We're also interested in finding out if voluntary efforts to market park programming resulted in more underrepresented groups of people using our parks. That was the discussion that we had when Emmett and Patrick joined the Equity Advisory Committee to talk about parks. And I think it's an expectation of us, if we really are serious about equity, that we not just talk about to the people who are there, but to the people who don't have a seat at the table and who don't have a voice in things that affect their community.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'd like to make one other comment, which is that I have an interest in continuing to develop the way that we communicate about all of the great work that this committee is working on and that Community Development Division overall is producing for the region. Joel, your comment about the national reputation of the Twin Cities park system, there is an understanding that we have a great park system. I think there is not a great understanding, even now, about the regional role that is involved in kind of tying that together, making sure that there's continuity across that system. I think there's still room to grow for us in communicating about that and telling the story of partnership with not only the implementing agencies, but all our local partners who are involved in some form in that work. So I have an interest in continuing to think about how do we communicate more effectively about success stories and about things that we're working on, et cetera. Just want to make that comment. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we have one more information item, and that is 2019 Community Development Division Preliminary Operating Budget. Heather and Terry are here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So I'm back again, Heather Augustin-Hebner.
I'm Terry Smith. I'm not Mary Robeson. I think that's what your agenda says, but she is here, and we can credit her for a lot of this work. But I'm Terry Smith, and I'm the Director of the Housing Authority for the record.
Wonderful. So today we are going to be walking you through the proposed Community Development Division 2019 operating budget. The primary focus of today's presentation will be the Metro HRA. We'll describe the HRA's current budget status, offer options, and then we hope to walk away from this meeting with some direction for our 2018 operating budget and for the 2019 budget development. So I'm just going to tell you there's a lot of information we're going to be going through today. We've done our best to narrow it down so this presentation does not take a really long time, and yet there's a lot of foundational information we wanted to make sure that we provided as you're making some investment decisions and help guide us for our 2018 budget and 2019 budget development. So this chart just shows where we're at with our overall budget development timeline. We're early in the development, so we've had division level conversations and identified where we're seeing issues and what we'd like to raise up to you to give you both for information and to help guide us with the rest of the development. Information and input that you provide today will help us shape and refine our budget for the presentation you will see at the full council on August 8th. So our budget objectives are pretty straightforward. Our budget's designed to support Thrive MSP 2040 and implement the Housing and Regional Parks Policy Plan and continue work on core programs that support the citizens and communities in the Twin Cities metro area. An emphasis on any budget is financial stewardship, and our intention is to construct a balanced budget, to identify structural issues where they exist and mitigate those issues over time, and to maintain reserve balances at council-adopted policy levels. So one of the things I'd like to start with is just share a little bit about our success in 2018 and where we are hoping for some investment in 2019. So one of the successes that we'd like to highlight is the recent council investment in Planet. The American Planning Association recognized the council's work as a national best practice. The award recognized the agency's planning assistance for Thriving Communities initiative. A multi-format package of online resources our staff created to assist local governments as they updated their comprehensive plans. The package of Planet and the local planning handbook includes planning guidance, online tools, and educational components in one centralized, accessible location. Parks and Livable Communities Unit passed through funds to regional parks implementing agencies and cities across the region. The current grant portfolio is in the neighborhood of $225 million that increases and decreases over the cycle of the year as we bring in new money and grants close out. One investment the division is requesting this year is to add funding for 1.5 FTEs. The division has reallocated already 0.5 of an existing FTE and anticipates salary savings from upcoming retirements will help fund more of these positions in 2020. Staff time will be dedicated to financial stewardship, customer service to regional partners, and mitigating risk to the council. Our 2019 budget has a large housing focus, and we'll be asking the council to consider investing general levy dollars into the Metro HRA programs. I'll talk in more detail about this later, but given current financial resources, we may need to either reduce the number of housing vouchers available to low-income families in the region or make a financial investment. The council also owns rental houses. The houses are aging and maintenance costs are increasing. We have initiated an asset management initiative to better understand the condition of our housing stock and forecast ongoing operating and capital maintenance needs. Our proposed division budget is just over $111 million. This represents a budget that maintains current service levels and fully issuing all available housing vouchers to low-income families in the region. You will notice that our expense budget is higher than our revenues budget. This gap primarily represents the difference between federal revenue and the cost required to operate our HRA program. This chart shows at a high level how we use our revenue, or where our revenue is. So 83% of CD's budget is pass-through revenue. This goes to housing programs, to regional parks, to livable communities, and there's also some interest money that goes to livable community grants. 16% of the revenues are used for operations, and this includes general fund levy, federal money for HRA administration, council-owned rental unit housing for maintenance of those units, and other miscellaneous small streams for housing programs. Overall, our operating, or another way to think about it is our non-pass-through budget, is decreasing from 18.5 in 2018 to 18 million in 2019. Costs are decreasing because the 2018 budget included a $1.4 million one-time fund for housing grants. This decrease is partially offset due to increased salary costs, consistent with negotiated contract increases, regional administration inflation costs, and the addition of $150,000 for new grant positions, and a number of just other normal budget fluctuations. Some went up and some went down. So let's start focusing on the HRA and particularly the Housing Choice Voucher Program. This program represents about 90% of our vouchers, so this is where we're going to focus our attention. So we've got two different areas of concerns. We've got rising housing subsidy, or we've got voucher payments and administration costs. We're going to walk through each of those individually as each area has different pressures and different potential solutions. We'll bring all the options together at the end of the presentation for your review and comment. So here's the bottom line. Given the rising cost of housing, the council cannot lease to all 6,502 families within its current budget. So the council faces a choice. We can either choose to make program reductions, or we can subsidize the program and administration by about $2 million annually in 2018 and ongoing. And obviously there's options in the middle, but those are the two extreme options that we're looking at. This chart shows what's been happening to the average voucher payments over time. These are very closely tied to rental market conditions. Historically, average payments have risen about 2% a year. We have seen them increase at higher levels in recent years. Average voucher payments have a significant impact. For example, a $15 increase in the average price of a voucher payment costs the council between $500,000 and $600,000. So really small movements in the housing market can have a really profound impact on our budget. So let's talk about a little bit about council policy and how that's impacted our program. The average cost of a voucher increased from $671 per month in 2016 to $740 a month today. That's an increase of 9% in 2 years, and this is historically high. I'm sure all of you have seen what's been happening, a number of statistics about what's going on in the housing market. This is just fallout for that and how it impacts our specific program. The increase is reflective of the fair market rents for the same period. Every year, we ask the council to review our policy annually and to set rent limits. Without recently improved rent limits the council has made, voucher holders would not be able to find housing they could afford in all communities, and this has been an important equity goal for the council. The underlying issue here is that while we can control the policies that underline the voucher payments, we can't control what the actual payments are. That is driven by who is in the pool and what is happening to our clients who are in that pool. So here's an option. Option one is we can reduce vouchers. Terry led a conversation to you a handful of months back to lay out what the HRA's pressures are. We would like direction on how to move forward in 2018 while we have more long-term conversations about a longer-term plan. No options that we are suggesting would remove vouchers from anybody in the region that currently has a voucher. So option one is the current path that we are on, and that is reducing vouchers. The HRA started 2018 with a 99.6% lease rate. We have reduced vouchers based on attrition since the beginning of the year and are now at about 98% leasing. If we continue to reduce leasing through attrition, we could get to 6,300 vouchers by the end of the year. This would result in an average lease rate of 96.9% for the year, but we would end the year at using 93% of our available vouchers. This would leave us in the black from a budget perspective, but it does have significant consequences for federal revenue in future years.
Heather, can I just interrupt you for a moment? I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. When you're using the phrase lease rate, you mean the percentage of the previous total number of vouchers that we are managing, essentially.
Mr. Chair, committee members, that's correct.
Okay.
So if you're looking at the Housing Choice Voucher Program and we have about 6,500 vouchers, we would need to end the year at about 6,300 vouchers.
Okay.
Leaving about 200 unused.
Thank you.
So this chart shows the impact of federal revenue and our ability to issue vouchers over time if we move forward with option one and reduce the number of vouchers that we're issuing. Federal revenue is historically been based on prior year spending. When we spend more in one year, we get more the next. If we spend less in another year, we anticipate that we're going to get less federal funding. Once we reduce vouchers and spending, our federal revenue declines each year, creating a downward step spiral of federal funding, and every year declines our ability to provide vouchers to low-income families in the region. Option two is this slide is going to provide voucher options for both 2018 and 2019. We can fully lease or some increment of fully lease or of leasing between coming in at 6,300 and coming in at 6,500 and pay for overages out of HRA reserves, assuming average rent payments stay close to current levels through the remainder of 2018. The HRA currently has a $1 million budgeted use of reserves in our 2018 budget, and that was adopted when you adopted the 2018 unified budget. We forecast we'll need another $900,000 in additional reserves to fully issue all available housing vouchers. Use of reserves is a one-time solution since it would bring reserves down close to minimum. Reserve levels should be considered in combination with the administration deficit, which we'll go into next. We forecast an ongoing funding gap to issue all vouchers. The gap is driven by the average voucher payment. As I noted from the previous slide, we anticipate an average deficit of between $1 and $2 million a year if inflation decreases to historical averages. So if the housing market inflation stays between 2 or 3%, we forecast that we're going to have a $1 to $2 million deficit on the voucher side each year. There's a number of assumptions that could impact these projections in a material way. For example, if the rental payments increase by 5%, that annual deficit gets closer to $3 million a year. So the biggest variables we can't control are the the housing market, which I just talked about, and federal funding levels. Different years, the federal government funds us at different levels on the vouchers. Some years it'll be 100%, some years it'll be 97%, some years it'll be 98%. And we are always in a position where we are developing our annual budgets prior to knowing what our actual federal allocation will be.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question here?
Please, Councilmember
Because
Cunningham.
I've been reading the New York Times and other publications about the HUD's projected cuts and their projection of raising rents for low-income people through our voucher program. Sure, and so I'm wondering, it's probably all in the works at this point, but I'm wondering, given this kind of signaling that's going on, how does that figure into this, or are we factoring that in at all?
Can we take that? Okay. Mr. Chair and Councilmember Cunningham, all these proposed changes that the current administration is proposing, of course, need to go through Congress to get approved. But one of the current proposals is to increase the percentage of income that low-income families pay towards rent. Currently, they pay 30% of their income, and the housing authority or the council makes up the difference. To the landlord, they're proposing 35% or 40%, so it would increase the amount that tenants pay, which would then in turn decrease the amount that the council pays. So, of course, it would have detrimental impacts on the families that we serve. It would have a favorable impact, if you will, on the council's budget because the funding that we get from the federal government would go further. So detrimental to families, favorable for our budget if it were to pass.
That's good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Yep.
Councilmember Dorfman.
A couple things. Can you help me understand this? The amount we have in reserves and our policy around how much we'd like to have in reserves and how much we think is reasonable to dip into when we need to.
Mr. Chair, council members, I'll specifically talk about that on a future slide.
Okay, I can wait.
Okay, I was going to give you a preview, but if you're okay to sit tight, we'll get there.
Wait. And then at some point, so while we talk about the financial impacts of what we do with the housing choice voucher program, important to also look at the need in the community and families and who are in need of housing, and so we can balance that in as well and not simply make a financial decision. And then at some point, we've just applied for 300 new mainstream housing vouchers. If we get those, how does that weigh into these discussions?
Mr. Chair, committee members, that's a good news story, and I've got a slide coming on that too. But the preview is it's a good news story.
Okay. Good news is
okay. One important thing that I do want to call out with this slide is that you see there's going to be a gap between. So remember how I said that funding in one year for the federal government results in federal the next. So if we invest more this year, we would anticipate that our federal revenue the next year is going to go up. But the gap that you're seeing here is because that federal revenue is always going to lag a year. So if you're wondering why is there a gap when we're anticipating federal revenue could go up, that's why. It's just that year lag between the investment and when we would see that federal revenue increase. Okay, let's transition over to HRA administration. So the second part of our structural imbalance is on the administration side of our budget. Federal revenues are currently prorated at 77% and does not cover the full cost of what's required to administer the programs. Our 2018 budget included a planned use of reserves to cover a $1 million deficit in administration, and we project a $900,000 administrative budget in 2019. This chart looks at the administration fee proration in isolation and represents the structural deficit if we don't have other revenue to fill that gap. So if you look at that blue line, that is what if the federal government gave us 100% of our costs, what it would look like. The orange line represents what we actually get, and the space in between is the gap. Now, historically, we've been able to fill the gap. We've been able to fill it with a number of different funding sources. We have council-owned housing, and sometimes that revenue has filled the gap. We have used housing reserves to fill the gap, and at times we've also had general fund levy support to fill that gap. The issue is that all of those available resources are shrinking, and we're seeing a situation where after 2018 for 19 and forward, we may not have any funding to fill that gap. So let's talk a little bit about council policy and how that's impacted our administrative budget over time. So it's impacted the finances in two primary ways. The first is that HRA staff were brought into alignment with the broader council step system. In 2013, they moved to the standard council salary step compensation structure. So before that, the HRA coordinators were not a part of the standard way that all council employees are paid. So this was a great thing to recognize the work of our council, our employees, and to make sure that all employees were treated uniformly under council policy. The second is
Chair,
Yes, Councilmember Dorfman.
why hadn't that always been the case? You know?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Dorfman, I think a little bit of a different scenario in 2013, the council moved to a step system. So prior to that, all employees, you come in at a salary and you stay there until you retire 40 years later. I'm exaggerating, but essentially so. And a step system approved by you all was implemented in 2013, 2014. When that step system was adopted, 20 of the HRA employees were not even on the grid. So 20 employees got an increase in salary because they weren't on the grid, and it was, frankly, it was an inequality that was inequity that was fixed. Okay, is essentially what happened.
The second is that the council moved to full cost allocation of regional administration costs a couple years ago. These costs were always incurred by the council, but paid for in the regional administration budget with general fund levy dollars. Fully allocated costs provide full transparency to program costs and provided an opportunity for the council to invest in Thrive initiatives. The primary administrative costs to HRA are allocated costs and salaries. I'm going to walk you through each line and how to interpret this graph. The blue line shows HRA salaries and benefit costs over time. You'll notice that increase in about 2013 that we talked about with that change to the STEP program. The orange line shows regional administrative costs allocated to HRA. Now you're going to notice that between 2011 and 2014, that line is pretty low. And then at about 2015 to 2019, it increases. Now that's only part of the story, and I'll get to the full story here in a minute. The gray line shows the estimated general levy subsidy to HRA. If you take that gray line from about 2011 to 2014, and then you marry it with the orange line in 2015, it provides an estimate of the regional administrative costs needed to support HRA. You'll note that historically the council has used general levy dollars to support HRA administration. So if you see in 11 to 14 that the gray line is what the general levy dollars, and then it falls off. So the council has always been paying for HRA administration. The difference is how it's allocating it. So prior to about 2014, regional administration allocated what HRA could pay. There was a switch in how we did that, and to pay for that transition over time, we've used reserves, we've used other income, and we've just gotten to the point where we're unable to pay for those costs right now. There were very solid business reasons for the change, but it's just put us in this situation, and it's time to have a discussion about what that may or may not mean. In Metro A, HRA is seen as a leader in the region and the country for its operations. So long story short is we run a really tight ship. We've actively worked to be more efficient and plan to continue that approach moving forward. The federal government has recognized our program as a high achiever. I think a really good indicator of this is according to HUD assessments, we should have 47 frontline staff. We have 39. And that's primarily due to our very high performing staff and structural and administrative changes we've made to become more efficient. Recent examples include implementation of a new housing software that moved us from paper to electronic case management and online waiting lists. We've also implemented e-signature and a biennial inspections pilot, and that pilot resulted from being able to take advantage of new federal HUD rules. We don't plan to stop this trend. Up next, we're going to look at our current processes. We're going to expand the pilot of biennial inspections. We're going to expand the use of inspection certifications in lieu of re-inspections. We're going to continue to work with our current software to make enhancements, to make the system quicker for our staff and our landlords. And we're going to continue our collaboration with neighboring agencies on policies and practices. So is this a long-term problem? We don't know. And it's dependent upon a lot of factors that are not directly in our control. The housing voucher deficit is due to rising costs. There have been years in our program's history where the rent increases have made it so the program actually brought in more revenue than our expenses were. During those times, we increased our revenue, or we increased our reserve balances to use in years where we did not have adequate funding to meet our budget. So if housing rental prices continue to increase, we're going to continue to have a problem. If they level out or decrease, the problem goes away. On the administrative side, it's really due to the prorated federal revenue. The change in federal funding would need to be made to address this problem long term. We're not optimistic that this is going to happen in the next couple of years, but theoretically, if the federal government didn't prorate us at 77% and they brought that up to 100%, we would be fine as well. So now we're going to get to the question about the new vouchers. The federal government rarely releases new vouchers, and the council submitted an application for an additional 200 vouchers. We forecast getting additional vouchers will improve our financial situation by about $100,000, assuming that other program components stay the same, including the current FTE component. Using federal formulas, we'll get about $1.7 million in new voucher revenue and about $150,000 in new administration revenues. We know that we've got a gap on the voucher side, and we'll need to use about $53,000 of the administrative revenue to fill that gap. Remaining $97,000 will go to fill the gap on the administration side. We can do this because we do not anticipating needing administrative costs to increase. We may choose to fill rather than leave open FTE positions, but we do not anticipate that this will result in any added FTE costs. Okay, so here's some options for administration. They're either to subsidize the cost or to make staff reductions. Subsidizing administration with general fund levy dollars is approximately $900,000. This brings the general levy subsidy close to what it would have been prior to 2014. So it's just hearkening back to what the council did a few years ago. The other option is to make staff reductions. This could be a significant challenge as we don't currently believe that we could administer the program and meet federal standards with this level of reduction. So let's bring the voucher and administration pieces back together and look at the program as a whole. Our recommendation is for HRA to fully lease all available vouchers in 2018 to low-income families in the region. This will help council meet a number of Thrive goals. We also recommend moving the 2019 HRA budget forward $2 million in general levy funding. $1.1 million of this will be so that we can fully use all of our vouchers, and $900,000 will be used for administration. So for those of you who like to see the numbers in a chart, let's show you what that looks like. Well, first we'll focus on 2018, and then we'll move on to 2019. 2018, assuming we fully use all of our vouchers, we will be running about a $2 million deficit. Now, we've already budgeted a $1 million use of reserves. If we fully lease, we anticipate we'll need a budget amendment of about $900,000 later this year. We can fill this gap with current reserves, but it puts us very close to minimum reserves. So if you look at the bottom of the chart, we are required by council policy to maintain an 8.3% reserves. So that's about $5.7 million in 2018 and about $6 million in 2019. This is what reserves are typically used for. They're to help us weather situations. So this would not be in contrast to decisions the council has made in previous budgets in previous years. Now we can stay in the black. We are on a path to manage our budget within the constraints of our current budget. And that has the ramifications that we've talked about before, and I'll have a slide at the very end that highlights all of those. I will note that there are some funding sources and expenses around the fringes. You know, this could change about $100,000 one way or the other, but we're pretty comfortable that about $900,000 is the target we would be shooting for.
Mr. Chair.
So let's look at 2019.
Give me one moment, Heather.
And
Councilmember
this may
Dorfman.
not be for you. Can anybody talk about where that minimum reserve requirement came from? And
Question.
And Mr. Chair, council members, broadly, it's a council adopted policy.
yeah, I understand.
I'd be happy to send. What I can do is I can follow up with a summary, and I can send that out if that would be helpful.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I might add to that. I think one of the things that HRA has struggled with over the years, along with the budget office, is should the target balance be on the full budget amount, which includes the pass-through dollars, which is the majority of our budget. And the decision has been made that yes, it should include all, which is of course a much larger reserve than if it were just on the administrative side.
And Mr. Chair, some people would probably argue that when you get this pass-through money, it's supposed to go to serving people in need, not go into reserves.
Okay, so let's transit. So I will make a note to follow up on that, and then let's look at 2019. In total, the 2019 HRA budget, assuming we fully use all of our vouchers, is running about a $2 million deficit. And assuming we use the reserves in 2018, we will be at or very near our minimum reserves going into 2019. So if we use all of our reserves in 18, going into 19, we're about 2 million shy of our reserves, and that's that red number that you see. So let's just do a high-level summary of what our options are in 18 and 19. So they're fairly similar, and we're looking for direction of whether the council wishes to invest levy funding in the HRA program, or if we need to manage our program to match federal revenue. As a summary, we recommend using $900,000 of housing reserves in 2018 to fully lease housing. This is broadly what reserves are designed to do, to help programs bridge difficult times. Our other option is to manage the federal budget. No families that currently have vouchers will lose their vouchers. We will reduce vouchers through attrition over time. This approach will set in motion a downward spiral of reduced federal income and a reduced ability to issue housing vouchers year after year. In 2019, we request $2 million in general levy subsidy to be used to fully issue all vouchers and subsidize our costs needed to administer the program. Our other option is to manage within the federal budget. This will mean about 200 families in the region will not be issued vouchers, and we may need to reduce FTEs to the level where the program may not be sustainable and able to meet federal standards. We're looking for direction on how to move forward with both our 2018 budget and 2019 operating budget presentation that will go to the council on the 8th. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Really troubling, but very comprehensive report. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a foreshadowing of this earlier this year, and I brought up the problem that it's not actually a regional service. We're managing a service on the behalf of portions of the region that chose not to manage their own service. So there are other housing entities within the region, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington, Plymouth, St. Louis Park, Scott County, Dakota County, Washington County, that are all facing the same issue because they're under the same federal funding that the Metro program is under. If we use general fund money, we're taxing the entire region for something that's only for a portion of the region, and then those other parts that are already getting taxed to fix this program have to decide, are they going to increase property taxes at the local level fix their own programs. And so it's problematic to me to use the general fund. I understand what you said about how we used to have regional administrative support for these things, but we had regional administrative support for everything that the council does. And if we were to go back to doing that, where we're cutting back on the regional administrative allocation for transportation and parks and the wastewater system and everything, it would eat up pretty much all of the general fund. Just doing this only for the HRA looks like it would take at least 13.5% of our general fund and go up from there, because the levy for the general fund goes up very, very slowly, and this has a potential to rise very, very quickly. So at that time, I suggested that we talk with Hennepin County, Ramsey County, Anoka County, Carver County to find out, did they want to have any skin in the game out of their levies to have time to look at this before 2019? Did any of those conversations happen? And if so, what was the answer?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Wolf, we've posed the question to the legal department recently, so we're waiting for them to look into it to see if that is an option.
Okay.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I was hearing this, and we just got this this afternoon, so it's still pretty fresh, and there's a lot of questions, I think. I had exactly the same concerns as Councilmember Wolf. I'm comfortable with the use of reserves. I do agree that's what reserves are for, but going into the general levy, where you're going to have some entities which will be taxed twice, really, for these services, and I find that really concerning. I do think it's something that should come to management committee, because I think that there we see the pressures of all these different budgets, because there's a lot going on with, especially with transportation transit as well. And so I think it's important to have that discussion with that group as well. But I am concerned about using general levy dollars for this.
Thank you. We have a couple. Councilmember Munn, you had a.
Mr. Chair, staff, we have a housing crisis, and I think this is the intended use of our reserves. I'm less concerned about treating everyone fairly and more concerned about providing shelter for 200 additional families. I think we've demonstrated that our staff are working beyond expectations of efficiency, and to have to lay folks off when there's great demand for their services doesn't seem fair to me.
Councilmember Dorfman.
This is an interesting issue because we're looking at it sort of from the financial impacts to us and to the Met Council, and how do we best balance that given the needs in the community. The reality is there have been a whole bunch of studies showing that homelessness costs more than housing. And so the interesting thing is whatever decision we make has this impact beyond we are the regional planning agency, beyond certainly the Met Council and our budget to others. I mean, if we have fewer housing vouchers over time and more people, single adults and families, are homeless, then we're going to see an increase in emergency room costs and corrections costs and shelter budget and other homeless assistance costs. So it's all sort of tied in to how do you manage this best as a region, with the priority of housing as many people as possible. And so, we can't sort of lose sight for the need, the crisis, and the need right now, and our responsibility as a regional planning agency to help with that need. But clearly, we have to partner with other government entities across the region as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to know what is what percentage levy increase would have to be required to meet the 2019 proposal? So what percentage of a levy increase would that be? And you don't have to answer that today, but when I was a county administrator, I'd look at, okay, well, what would that represent in terms of the cost increase, realizing that there are other areas that we're also facing similar types of problems. But I mean, in order for me to grasp it, I have to say, oh, that's a 1% increase, that's a 0.5%. I'm not clear on it. That's a question. The other question that I have is, have we called a meeting of the other HRAs to have that conversation with them? Because as Councilmember Wolf says, they're all facing similar pressures to us. And so I'd like to know what the other HRAs are doing to address it so we can get a sense of that across the region. The last time this was before us, I believe Councilmember Wolf had suggested that we go to the counties and ask them to, that are involved, to ask them to come to the table to have that discussion. The real question is who needs to have that conversation. I'm not sure that's a staff level discussion. I actually think that would be a council level discussion if we're going to have that kind of conversation with the county, because unless we're going to say we're not going to do the program, which is an option that didn't get put on the table. I mean, we could say we're not going to do that and give it back to the counties as their responsibility, and under state statute they have a responsibility around these issues. So I mean, the question, but if we're not willing to do that, which I think is a pretty drastic step, then, my question when this was raised was, what is the leverage that we have to have that conversation with the counties, if in fact they're, we'll just say, please help us out here. I'm not sure that'll carry much weight, and that's what I said the last time that came up. But I do think it's worth a conversation to have with the counties to say, we're facing this, and here's the impact in homelessness and other costs that will come out of this if we don't do this well. And that's the analysis I'd like to see as well is, okay, so these 200 families go where? I don't quite understand that they would necessarily go into homeless, but they may. And then, as Councilmember Dorfman raised the question of what is the additional cost, it'd be good to see that, and we could actually put that on the table and have that discussion. So those are questions that I have. In terms of direction, I actually think that using the 900,000 makes sense. It's a one-time thing. It doesn't fix the problem. It kicks the can down the road a little bit. And it sounds like we need that additional time to really try to sort out what our decision here is. Overall, I would say I'm leaning with Councilmember Munt on this issue, but I think we need some more discussion. That would be my one council member perspective on giving you direction.
Thank you. Councilmember Mon? I mean,
Wolf?
sorry.
We look so
Councilmember
much
Wolf.
alike. I just wanted to comment on Councilmember Cunningham's discussion on the general fund increase, what that would do. We've actually been maxed out continuously on our general fund throughout this council's tenure, and it goes up only a few $100,000 a year. So what it means is that's $2 million of something else that we can't do because the money is going to subsidize this program.
Thank you.
Member Dorfman.
Just thank you for that.
I'll just echo. I mean, I think it's a healthy reserve to have, almost, and I get nervous when we have too big a reserve. I think those are dollars that are meant to be spent helping people get housed in our region. So I'm not opposed to looking at that as certainly a portion of the solution.
I have a question about kind of time frame. The intent is to bring some, I don't know how articulated this recommendation has to be for the August 8th council-wide dialogue, kind of the preliminary budget discussion, but can this go to management committee? I'm just a little bit confused in terms of time frame for some of these discussions to take place in fairly rapid order. Can you give us a sense about, when do we need to feel like we're giving really specific direction in response to your request to inform the budget?
Mr. Chair, council members, I would definitely want to connect with Mary Bogie and some of the direction that she's given. I do believe that at the next management committee that there'll be a preview of the operating budget, and I could surely connect back with Mary and Paul Connery and regional administration and figure out how we may integrate that into the conversation at management committee. And I will also say broadly that budget development is a process. So I can't give you a specific date right now, but this is clearly an issue where I'm guessing a number of council members will want information and provide input on the direction that we move.
Please, Terry.
Mr. Chair, may I add one thing? I think the other thing from a programmatic standpoint is, as Heather indicated, we're on a trajectory right now to reduce the number of families that we're serving, and we haven't terminated anybody. We've had vouchers come open that we haven't filled yet. So if we're going to start to do that, then knowing that that is the direction we are going to go sooner rather than later is helpful. So I sort of see it as a two-pronged issue. Is we have the 2018 like right now and 2019, planning for next year. When I came to you all in April, before we had our formal budget, the direction I sort of heard was, let's split the difference. So maybe we fill some of the slots, but not all. But we really wanted to dig into that further today because that has long-term consequences if we don't fill all the slots. So getting a sense of where you would like to go in the more immediate future would be helpful.
Okay. Councilmember Wolf?
On that, I would vote use reserves and keep the full strength of the program. It's next year that I'm talking about.
Councilmember Barber?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I agree with that. I think that there is a short-term need that we have reserves available to do it. And then I think the bigger discussion around 2019 needs to focus not only on the use of the general levy, but to Councilmember Dorfman's, how is that reserve established? Or what are there other things that we need to be looking at there? And I think some of that discussion can go out to that management committee meeting, because those are the kinds of questions you're going to have.
Thank you. I think that really reflects my sense too, is this immediate year. I really support using the reserves for the immediate need. I share the concerns about setting a precedent for using the levy for the program for the reasons that you described. And I also feel like, I think it was in yesterday's paper, the suggestion by this administration that the war on poverty can conclude because we've worked ourselves out of that problem. I really strenuously disagree with that, but that obviously suggests some direction from our federal partners. And so I want to be really deliberate about what kind of precedents we are or aren't setting as we step into this difficult future, frankly.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to prolong this, and I'm in agreement with all of what just got said. I do think this conversation with the counties, we should follow through on with the chair and some, maybe a delegation of this committee. We have a former county commissioner here as well. I just think that, we should open the door to that conversation. And the real question is, what is our leverage in that conversation? Meaning, very slim. But I think we owe it to these clients and others to at least open the door for that conversation, given that other HRAs. And then I'd also suggest, and I'm not sure how this happens, but I'd like to know what the other HRAs are doing before we start making decisions, because we need to at least be in lockstep with what's happening in the region and not be doing something that's in a different universe. And then the question is there some way that we could we may need to look at reconfiguring the system of how HRAs have. I mean, I think this is an opportunity. This crisis is actually an opportunity to say, is the system working as it is? And maybe there's a way to reconfigure that system. That's the bigger thinking that we need to have on the table right now if we're going to deal with the long-term deficit. Because if we think we're going to manage it within the parameters that we're operating in, I don't think that's going to happen, right? Meaning we're leaving the future councils with a bigger problem down the road, which we may be able to propose something revolutionary or at least innovative about how we approach this as a region with Minneapolis HRA and the rest of the players out there. And they're probably looking for an answer too. So I'll stop there. But I don't know if you want to take a role in that, or if everybody thinks that's a good idea. If people don't,
No, I think it's a
you
good
know,
idea.
we should move forward. But I don't think we should sit on our hands and just pass it off to staff.
Yeah, I agree with you. There may well be some existing channels or lines of dialogue threads where we can kind of tap into to connect with other partners. Either I mean, maybe it's both and maybe it's staff and council member. Maybe there's shared or distinct threads of engagement among them. But I agree totally that we have a convening responsibility and an opportunity to understand what's the landscape look like.
You have something?
Councilmember Elkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, the other local entities have levies for their HRAs, and they're not just used for housing choice, they're also used for redevelopment purposes, but we don't have an HRA specific levy. Maybe we should. I'm sure that requires enabling legislation.
authorized.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, yeah,
Serving
right.
are authorized.
You're going to take it on yourself.
Right.
Has to what extent is this feedback kind of sufficiently specific for your immediate request? I want to make sure that we're meeting your needs in the immediate sense.
From a programmatic standpoint, very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
And I would, Mr. Chair and committee members, I would say from a financial lens, and we're obviously tag teaming this together. I think we have answers already to a number of the questions that you asked, and we're going to have some additional work following up on some of the questions that we don't have answers for, but we will pull all of that information.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much.
You.
Council members, before we conclude, I wanted to say,
Great presentation.
I'd like to propose that items 3, 9, and 10 go on the council's business agenda, and that items 1, 4, and then 4 through 8 go on our consent agenda. Unless anyone objects, we'll go with that. Okay, great. We'll be adjourned. Thank you very much.